Hi, it's Alison and Lee from the Law School and Bar Exam Toolboxes. We are here today to talk about the NextGen Bar Exam. It is coming, and we are here to help you get ready for it. So, welcome, Lee. What's going on here?
Well, I think the first question to think about is who should be thinking about the NextGen right now? I mean, it's 2025.
And we're already talking to people about this question.
We are. And, well, a lot of people, because jurisdictions are going to start administering this test in July 2026 and February 2027, which sounds very far away, but it really is not when you look at the calendar. Connecticut, Guam, Idaho, Maryland, Missouri, Northern Mariana Islands, Oregon, Palau, U.S. Virgin Islands, and Washington are all in the first group that will be testing, I guess, in a way, the NextGen bar exam for everyone else. And the rest of the jurisdictions will roll out between July 2027 and 2028 because they will be sunsetting the UBE in 2028. So there are no choices left. So It will be NextGen land.
Yeah. I always find it amusing when I get one of the emails from the NextGen, like, we're so proud to announce that certain jurisdiction is adopting the exam in July of 2028. You're like, as long as they cannot do it.
Right, exactly. That is the last time they have the option to adopt it or not adopt it. Yes.
It's going to be interesting. I mean, we're going to have some other podcasts coming out on kind of the basics of the exam, but I know you talked with Themis about this recently. So give us a refresher before we dive in.
Yes. So this exam, as we said, is going to replace the Legacy UBE, which is now what they're calling it. It's got like a new name.
The Legacy. Sounds like a hotel in Vegas.
It does. It is 1.5 days, so 1.5 days instead of 2 days of testing. It's now going to be a computer-based exam. They swear it's going to go better than the California computer-based exam. Low bar. I know, right? But there will be no more Scantrons and no more paper question packets. So that is something important for folks to note. You will take the test on your own computer, but in a proctored setting using exam software. There will be multiple choice questions that seem really a lot like the MBE. That's going to be 49% of your score. So this is interesting because I think when I remember the early discussions about the NextGen, it was that the MBE was going away and multiple choice was not going to have as much influence, except it now has 49% of your score with MBE-like questions. So that's an important thing to note because I think that is different than some of the dialogue around this test from a while ago. There are still performance test tasks that are a lot like the MPT, the multi-state performance test, but they're now 60 minutes instead of 90 minutes. And here's where it gets more interesting. There's something new called the integrated question sets, or the lingo apparently is the IQS, the integrated question sets, the IQS. And they are special, and we're going to spend a lot of time talking about that. But the thing is that they're something completely new, and they involve reading and asking a variety of questions in a variety of formats. They could be multiple choice. They could be short answer. They could be what they're calling like medium answer. It's like a lot. So that's the really new thing that everybody's going to need to get used to. It feels very different than an issue spotter. And that's really replacing the essays from the UBE. So here's where it also gets really fun. So the test is given in three-hour sets, which means that each set, so your 3-hour set, will have standalone multiple choice questions like the MBE, 2 integrated question sets, and 1 performance task. And you get 3 hours to do all of those together in one bucket. Doesn't that sound fun?
That sounds like a lot, I'll be honest. I mean, even in California, where in the afternoon, they give 2 essays and a PT that's longer, and people have to manage their own time between those. Even that gets a little hairy for people. And this is a lot of like task switching and different types of things. And you've got multiple choice questions mixed in with this other stuff. I mean, even like some of the PTs I looked at, like they have multiple choice on like legal research. Like it's just a lot of stuff going on. And I think it's going to be very challenging for people to sort of manage that flow of time when it's not just that you get, 6 essays for 30 minutes. And at the end of 30 minutes, you move on. It's that you have all this stuff, and some of it should take, a minute and a half or whatnot to stay on track. And then other parts of it are going to take much longer. So I just think it's going to be very confusing for people for a while.
It's going to take a lot to get used to, especially because most law school exams have not been designed this way.
Oh,
so
good Lord, no.
At all.
Like we've looked at some of this. We're like, yeah, never. This is all new.
This is all very new. But the changes don't stop there because the subjects tested are also going to be a bit different.
Fun.
So you are required to have what they call legal knowledge of the current 7 MBE topics plus business associations. And then stay tuned because if you're taking the bar later, they're going to add in family law just as like a bonus.
Yeah.
And they're going to test what they call legal skills, which is legal research, legal writing, issue spotting and analysis, counseling and advising, negotiation and dispute resolution, client relationships, and management. Do we know what all of those things are? I'm not sure, but they are all skills that lawyers are supposed to have. I'm just not sure exactly how they're going to test all of them, but that is how they've decided that they are changing the test. So it is less substantive knowledge. So there might be law that you need to know from some of these subjects, the 7 subjects plus business associations and eventually family law. But you're not necessarily going to have to recall the same amount of law that you did if you're taking the typical UBE.
Right, because they have this content outline, and as I understand it, has like starred topics and non-starred topics. And so some of them, I think it's the starred ones you have to know kind of verbatim, and then the other ones you should just be familiar with. Yeah.
And what does that mean? We're not sure yet because they haven't released a bunch of questions. So I think there's still a lot of open questions of what some of this means. Yeah. So when I have been reviewing this and in my free time, reading sample bar questions, which is what we do for fun. I don't know what you all listening do for fun, but this is what we do for fun.
Never a dull day.
I know, never a dull day over here at the toolboxes. But what the part that I think we need to talk the most about are these integrated question sets. So we're going to continue on the podcast talking about all pieces of the test and how it might be different or the same. But I really want to start with this because I think it is going to be the most shocking to the system of a lot of law students who are taking this test. So let's just talk about like this a little bit because it is new. I don't know if it's exciting, but it is what it is. So we know that integrated question sets appear twice per section. So you're going to get like 6 of them and they're short. They're designed to be 24 minutes. No, not 25. No, not 23. 24. Do you know what 24 is such a hard thing to know? Like 30 minutes.
Yeah.
24 minutes, honestly. Anyway, so they're tied to a common fact scenario. So you start with a fact pattern. It could be they just could tell you the facts. You could read a little interview. You could read something that like your fictional boss has given you. And then you have questions and possibly more information coming at you. So it feels a lot like the SAT to me back from my SAT days, although it's been a long time since I took the SAT. But the questions are kind of woven through these other kind of pockets of information. So you could have multiple choice, you could have short answer, you could have what they call medium answer, which is like a drafting set, which is a little bit longer. They can include statutes and cases. They can include other documents like pleadings or like letters or interviews. And each one of these 24-minute sets is going to be 21%, couldn't be 20%. It has to be 21% of your score. The math on this is just and the other just round up, guys.
Well, I've also kind of noticed that they have different numbers of percentages in different places that I've seen, all of which are still live. So we don't really exactly know at this point.
21.
I've seen 21. I've seen like around 25. Like it'll be something in that zone, in that range, probably. Yeah.
One of the things that I think is interesting about the integrated question sets, and we're going to continue to dive more into them, is this idea that you can get partial credit. And this is a very new idea for the bar exam. The bar exam has not really been into partial credits. You know, the MBEs are very much like you get it right, you get it wrong, that's it. But they have decided that partial credit is going to be available. And they're doing this in questions that have, they're multiple choice questions that have 6 answer choices. 6, not 4, 6. And you have to pick 2 that are right.
Sounds like a lottery question. Pick
Yeah,
two.
pick two.
But if you get one of the two, hey, you get partial credit.
Partial credit. And then they also have some of these short answers where you have to like list 3 things and you could get partial credit for that.
Yeah.
Yes. So there's a lot of like listing and options. And so partial credit is going to be available, which is comforting, yet is also just going to make this exam even feel a little trickier because there isn't just one right answer. I mean, that was the thing about the MBE, and I don't like the MBE. Don't get me wrong. Like, that was a miserable day of my life. Like, I didn't enjoy studying for it. But before I walked into the exam room, my dad called me that morning and said, just remember, because the right answer is always in front of you. And I was like, okay. Don't think that made me feel better, but at least there was clarity that each question had one right answer. And I think that there's a little bit of ambiguity around this idea that you could get partial credit. And what does that partial credit look like? We don't really know.
Yeah. And the other thing we went through some of these, we'll talk about them. But one of the things I was kind of noticing was it's really unclear what a pass would be on a lot of this stuff. Like if you're asked to do, one of them we worked through had like 5 answers we were supposed to give or something. And I think both of us got 4, like definite right. And then like maybe the others were like kind of could be maybe right. So it's like, well, is 4 out of 5 enough? I mean, that's 80%. Is that good? Is that bad? I have no idea.
I don't know. Yeah. And the other thing that's going to be interesting is, okay, first of all, I am not a statistician or the psychometrics folks that do tests, but they have to curve this stuff because they're going to fail a portion of the people in the room. And it doesn't look particularly easy to curve. Maybe that's just me, but I feel like partial credit maybe doesn't make it easy to curve. I don't know.
Well, I think that's why they're using so many multiple choice questions, either standing alone or scattered throughout the test, is that those are objective. Even with the pick 2, it's like there are 2 that they want you to get.
True.
I think the harder ones to score are these like short answer, or even, I have no idea what a medium answer even is, but I'm going to stick with a short answer. So the short answer, might ask you to read a statute and read some facts and read an interview, and then advise your client, as to their causes of action. Fair enough. So they may have, 5 different answers you could choose from, and you have to get 3 of them or something. But those are, I don't know. I was not blown away by a lot of the examples of those, particularly with the answers. There was a lot of inconsistency in the answers they provided around sort of fundamental things about like, well, do you need to cite to the statute? In one out of a set of 5 answer choices, one of them did, one of them didn't. They were both correct, and they were talking about different subparts of the statute. So if I was drafting the answer choices, I would suggest that, either both of them cite to the subsection or neither. But no, one does and one doesn't. So it's this thing of like, what are you going to get credit for? I don't know.
Yeah, and they're developing rubrics that they're going to give to this individual states, and the individual states are scoring these. So they have assured everyone in the documentation they have provided that there will be consistent scoring, but we're also really changing up how these are being scored. And so it's going to be interesting to see how the states really tackle scoring them using the rubric. If the rubric looks like the sample answers that they have put online that you were saying has some inconsistencies. So as you mentioned, we have been going through these question sets. And so I thought it would be interesting to just share what some of our initial reactions were when we were reading them, when we were sitting down to answer them. So my initial thought was, wow, this is very different. I'm just going to say that like, that was my initial thought. And I had looked at these briefly, like when they first started talking about the test, but this one I sat down with the questions and like with the pen and, I cheated and did it on paper because I was traveling. But like I did sit down and say, I'm going to read this question like I was taking the question. And it felt very different. And granted, I don't study for the bar all the time, but we're like 14 years into prepping people for this exam. Like I know a lot of law, and some of these I was like, I just really have to think about that one. I didn't get a perfect score because, like we said, we didn't get all of the possible answer choices. Now, granted, we aren't studying for this test, But I'm trying to figure out how people should study for this test. So it was interesting. I thought it was hard. I thought it's not consistent with what is being taught in law school and how we're being tested in law school. I thought also it initially felt like a performance test because of the way that it kind of wove in these fact patterns, which I find comforting because I've always enjoyed that part of the bar. But then it takes a left turn with these questions. And I was like, do I need, and then I kind of was a little confused, like, do I need to pull in my own personal knowledge? Is this something that is in the set? I think that's one of the things that's very clear from the old way of testing with the performance tests and the essays is you knew in the essays you had to have the knowledge in your head to execute the question. And in the integrated practice sets, you have to have some knowledge. This, like we said, the starred stuff and the content outlines. And you need to have these legal skills. And then they're also providing you with things. And so I think it was also a little bit like, what's missing for me here? Is it that I haven't studied this law in a while? Or is it that I don't have legal skills, which is troubling since I am an active licensed attorney in California. Don't tell the bar. But I felt like I wasn't sure. Like I wasn't sure what was missing for me to get that right answer. So that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I had that same sense of like, what exactly are they A, asking for here, and B, asking for me to call upon to answer this question. Mm-hmm. So, they've released these online. You can go look at them. We're not going to talk about them in excruciating detail for copyright reasons, but you can go do the two sets that are out there and you'll be on the same page with us. But in one of them, for example, it was kind of a basic like landlord-tenant question. And one of the things they asked was sort of, how would you advise your client, or like what might be the risks for your client, if they decide to proceed and like sue the landlord. Okay, fair enough. So I'm like looking for stuff, in the statute or whatever. And those answers were in there with or without a citation. But there were also all these other answers that were like very general. Things like litigation is stressful and you would be living there, or it might impact the relationship you have with your landlord. And I'm like, wait, that's the category of things that they're looking for? It was just confusing.
Yeah, I also found that interesting. And when I was reading that, I was like, well, in the initial fact pattern, it did say that my client didn't want to move and they didn't have funds. And I'm like, I guess this is where those facts are being used. I mean, that was also how I was coming at it of like, what had they included in the materials? And then what was I supposed to do with that information?
Yeah.
And we talk a lot when we're talking about the traditional essay issue spotter. You take the facts and you find the facts that match the law and then you put them together. And this isn't quite the same. I was reading the fact pattern saying, I'm like, okay, well, where are my legally significant facts? But we're not just recalling law. I'm trained to think about matching law to facts. And this is a little bit different because it's also looking at like the human element of like, well, if my client said that they don't have any money and they don't want to move, then I better try and keep them from having to do that, which is an important skill as a lawyer, to listen to your client. But that is not something that's been tested on the bar exam before.
No, definitely not. It just felt like a little squishy to me. I mean, I feel like once you do some of these and get familiar with it, okay, now put in your back pocket, anytime they ask a risk factor for your client, you can probably, if you can't come up with anything more specific, say something like, well, litigation is stressful and nobody wants to go through that. But like, is that really what we're testing? I don't know. Is that going to give me credit on like every one of these type of questions? Because if so, awesome. We just gave you like, some free points on the bar. Take them away.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's client counseling, which is true. But I don't know. It felt very different. So, folks,
they honestly gave me a headache.
Yeah, they're hard.
And I did do it on the computer the way that you probably would, where I had to be like reading something, read the question, scroll back up.
She wins by doing it on the computer.
No, and it's like that is definitely. I found a lot of this stuff to be like super detailed and like pretty nitpicky about like really specific things that I might have read like 2 pages ago, and I'm in like question 5 of the set, and they're asking me some like super specific detail that then I have to remember exists and like go back up and look for it and then go back down to the question. Like it was a lot of that kind of like back and forth, like screen working memory stuff that I think is going to be challenging for a lot of people.
Yes, because this idea of working memory, which for those of you who don't know, working memory is like the fact that you can read something and remember what you read to keep reading, and being able to kind of retain like information to apply to whatever you're doing. And it turns out, unfortunately for all of us, that all of our new attention issues, because of the way that we use technology and have taught ourselves to skim, makes our working memory kind of not as good as it used to be. And anyone who has attention deficit issues typically struggles with working memory. That's like one of the challenges of the kind of ADHD mind. So, for those of us who have attention issues because of the way we live our lives, almost everyone, and anyone who is diagnosed with ADHD or undiagnosed with ADHD, which is, as we are learning, is a large portion of the law school population, this is going to be a challenge. And it turns out working memory is not really that easy to get to
Right.
make a lot better as well. So that is, I think, one of the things that really struck me was we're asking folks to like hold a lot. And I'm someone who, for stories, my working memory with numbers is garbage. But for stories, I have pretty good working memory, which has made performance tests and things pretty simple for me because I love a good narrative. But I don't like reading things on the computer. My working memory when reading things on the computer is not as great. And so it is going to be a lot of deciding what is going to make this challenging for you and then really practicing and getting better at it. Because this test on a computer would be a challenge for me, and it would have been a challenge for me when I sat for the bar.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I'm a person who has like very good factual working memory. I mean, this could be a reason we both ended up being lawyers, but I found this format to be challenging.
Yeah.
Just the sort of density of the material and the switching back and forth between different types of materials. So it is almost like a mini performance test, but in 24 minutes. So, you have the like transcript from the interview, you have the statute, you have your boss telling you what you're going to do, and then you have all these things to do. So that's a lot of like back and forth on a screen in a scroll type of situation. So I don't know, I mean, how they're exactly going to set this up, on the screen, but we all have really small laptops these days. So if you have a 13-inch monitor, you're not going to be realistically able to have like 4 windows open that you're taking notes in. So I don't know. I think those type of things, which really seem like what they're not supposed to be testing, are actually going to come into play for a lot of people. And people are really going to have to figure out some kind of strategies around this.
Yeah. And I think for like, let's say an ADHD student or someone else with learning differences, of course they're still going to provide accommodations. Yet I'm not sure just extending your time is going to, it'll give you more time for scaffolding and more time to have strategies, but it's the setup of the test that is going to be challenging. And I think something that is going to need to be worked on and really dissected for how it's going to be challenging for you as an individual test taker so you can come up with strategies. So for me, reading this stuff on the computer, not so great. I would have to like study and force myself to do it that way quite a lot.
Right. And like, I really like having my notes and my different color highlighters. And I don't think people are going to have any of that.
No, it looks like they're not even going to have a piece of scratch paper.
Yeah. So for me, like, that's kind of how I think through a lot of this stuff is like in a structured way on paper, writing it down. And like, if I can't do that, it's just going to be this other level of like, okay, how am I going to like have a process on this, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. So now that we've gotten everyone worked up about this test, I just wanted to go through, we're calling them fears and fixes. So some things that people are nervous about, and then what we're kind of recommending at this point. And again, there's not still a ton of information out there. The law schools are doing the best that they can. The prep companies are doing the best that they can. But we will continue to evolve some of our recommendations as we get more information and everybody spends more time on this. But let's start with the first one, which is I'm not going to have enough time because these are quick sets.
This is interesting to me because when they started talking about the NextGen, they made a very clear point that they did not want it to be super time pressured. They were doing all these test questions with all these different types of people. And so I thought going into this, like, timing is not going to be such a problem. Well, we talked with somebody who works at a law school who apparently has given students a bunch of these that they've written, and it turns out it is a huge problem. Yeah. So I thought that was very interesting. I mean, I set a timer when I started these and I finished them like quite quickly, but I also like think really quickly. That's, my superpower. It's not deep thinking, it's quick thinking. It just is what it is. And even then I wasn't like writing out a full answer. So I do think more than I expected, there may be some pretty big timing problems here.
Yes. I also think the other thing that's interesting is how students know how to allocate within the 24-minute window. Like, is a multiple choice question in the integrated question set just supposed to take me a few minutes? We had all of the structure in the old UBE and the California bar that's like, okay, each MBE question on average should be this long. And we could tell students if they were really, to do some practice with a stopwatch to understand what that means. We could say, like, if you're not writing after 7 minutes of your MEE question, that's a problem. But you don't have that here because the integrated question sets, the rhythm of each one is going to be different. And that's challenging. So I can't say, like, for a short answer question, you should not spend more than 5 minutes. I mean, maybe we can, but I don't know the next question, like how the balance is going to be. And I think that's going to be tricky to keep people on task. I feel like people are going to look up and be like, oh no, I have 4 minutes left. What do I do?
Right. And also the two that they presented so far are radically different in terms of like how the questions are being asked. So one of them is fairly like, you answer some multiple choice, you do some short answer. The second one, as I recall it, is basically like, here's a lot of stuff. Now find 5 errors. And that is like, I can see people spiraling on that for like a very long time. Or you might just like find 5 of them and be like, cool, I'm done. That took 10 minutes,
Right. But I think that's the thing is like, does that take 10 minutes? Does it take 5? I mean, when I was looking at it and doing that question, I asked myself, like, how long am I supposed to like spend looking at this? Because I also generally work through tests pretty fast. And I'm like, am I going too fast? Am I going to like
am I skipping stuff?
Like, like, I don't know. Cause I don't know what it
was a very weird question.
The goalpost has been moved. So this is going to be tricky. So one of the things that I would say is that you really need to practice with these questions. You need to understand the question types. You need to figure out how to allocate your time between the questions and how you're going to budget. How are you going to get this practice? Well, hopefully your law schools are doing some work to support you. And if you haven't heard that your law school is doing work, it would be great to go to your academic support or bar services office and say, I'm getting nervous about this. What is the school going to be able to offer? Because some schools are being really progressive in how they're going to prepare students for this. Some schools aren't. So find out whether your school is. But I think you need to not get sucked into this idea that it's shorter because it's only a day and a half. And, you don't need to know as much law. So it's going to be easier because unfortunately it's not.
Yeah, I definitely have been disabused of that because I really thought like, oh, it's going to be, easier and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh my God, not exactly. I mean, I also wonder what these IQSs, like if I would kind of look through the whole thing and like see what I was going to do. I would have to experiment with that to see what works better. But I think there's going to have to be some experimentation.
Oh, for sure. I mean, and that is kind of what's challenging about this is that there's not a lot of information to experiment with. So we all have to like write our own and figure it out. it's kind of interesting. Yeah. So it's a unique time if you're trying to help anyone prepare for this test. Another fear is just that the format is so unfamiliar. And we're here to tell you, it is. It is. And switching between multiple choice short answers or drafting in a single set feels really jarring. That is not how we are used to being tested in law school. Law schools also are not known for pivoting quickly. And so I do not think that you will see these reflected, that soon in your law school classes if they even decide to do that. It's going to be interesting. You're going to need to do a lot of practice and you're going to have to look at the different types of questions and have attack plans for each one of them and a strategy going in.
Yeah, I guess one possible upside is that maybe if your brain like thrives on novelty, this will be more fun. True. Don't know what's coming around the corner. I mean, also anxiety.
Yeah, I was like, wait a minute, novelty is also one of the 4 things that causes anxiety.
Yeah, fine line.
Okay.
Yeah, anyone who has anxiety, I think, is going to struggle a lot with this test, to be honest, just because you do not know what's coming. And they are like kind of out of left field, a lot of this, at least what they've released so far.
Yeah.
The select 2 questions. Yeah.
Oh, this is another fear for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think they're weird. The other thing that I noticed on those, which I thought was interesting on at least some of them, is they're asking for more. They'll ask you, for example, like, what is a, they'll give you a story, like an MBE type question, and be like, what are several possible causes of action? And so then that seems like not that hard. And at the end, when you've gotten the answer, it's not that hard. But you have to run through like all 6 of those elements and like apply them. It's a lot of like very quick recall and issue spotting, which I think could be a challenge.
Yeah. And how long am I supposed to spend on that question?
Right.
I don't
exactly.
know. That's
I just had to run through like 6 things,
Right. So it's probably not 2 minutes, but is it 4? I don't know.
Yeah. The one I'm thinking of was like an adverse possession type of thing. And like usually, adverse possession is usually pretty obvious that that's the universe you're in, right? So usually you'd be like, oh, that sounds like adverse possession. These are the elements of adverse possession. I have memorized those. Let me go through them and apply them and like figure out what it. But here it's like, okay, I've got adverse possession, but now I have these 5 other causes of action that don't seem that obvious that I now have to like work through one by one. And like that would take a while.
Yeah. Another concern that's being talked about is that the sets are just too long and dense. And this one, I was like, I don't think they feel too long and dense in comparison to like the performance test, or even some of the MEE essays were long, given for how like long you had to actually do them. But under time pressure, students are going to feel like this is a lot of information, especially with the task switching, especially that you're going to continue to get information as you move through the question set. So I think the volume of information is going to feel like quite a lot. And that's why practice is going to be so important to build your stamina and make it so this doesn't feel novel. So I think that that is like one of the things. I was reading a book on stress recently, and they were talking about I know the acronym, it's NUTS. It's like novelty. I think it's uncertainty. I can't remember what T and S mean right this minute, but novelty was the first one that, and that when you're prepping for an exam, the way you handle novelty is through practice. So it doesn't feel like a surprise. Unfortunately, these tests are going to feel like a surprise for a while because there's just not going to be a huge volume of that practice. But the best thing you can do is expose yourself to a lot of these question sets. And that's why you need to talk to your bar review providers, and you need to talk to your school to see how much exposure you can get to hopefully take a little of the edge off.
Right. And obviously that's a challenge because they've at this point released 2 integrated question sets. Yeah. So you should definitely go look at those. I think they're interesting. They're worth looking at. But I mean, we're going to need a lot more material. So that means that everybody's going to have to basically be writing their own. So, it is what it is.
It is what it is. I mean, let's be honest. A lot of bar review providers, a lot of schools have been working on this problem. So you should ask them what they're doing so you can make really informed choices. And like I said, I think it is the moment. If you are not taking the exam, especially like if you're not taking the February exam, or if you're considering taking the next gen in the next, few seasons, you need to go to your law school and start talking to them about it. And if they're not being forward thinking about it, then I think as students, the more you ask, the more likely it is that they will start to give you more support.
Yeah, and people can go listen to your episode with Themis where you guys talked about what they're doing. Because obviously there's work being done, but I do think we're in a pretty limited universe of like actual content from the NCBE at this point.
Yeah, and I just don't think that's going to get better. So, based on how it's been rolled out. So, So I think that I think the closing messages that I want folks to take from this is do not get swept away in this idea that this is going to be easier. It's going to be easier to study for. It's going to be easier to pass. I just don't think that's the case. I think this is still going to be quite hard. And I think you want to expose yourself to the questions. So if you think you're going to take one of these next gens, go online and look at the question sets on the NCBE website and read them, because that's going to, you also need to see what your initial reaction is. And that's going to inform, your next steps, and advocate for yourself at your school and make sure that you're getting the support that you need. Because this is honestly, it's bigger than I think they sold it.
Yeah, I think it's a different test than we thought we were getting. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. I mean, hey, everyone's going to take it. They're still going to pass people. Everyone's in the same boat.
I don't think it's impossible. I think for some people it's going to be probably easier, and for other people it's going to be more challenging.
Yeah.
And I think it, it kind of goes down in specific ways about just what your own personal like strengths and weaknesses are, whether the test is going to be easier or harder for you. But I do not think it's going to be easy across the board, like kind of some people may have thought.
Yeah. So anyway, we will continue to update you. We're going to do some podcasts walking through the different parts of the test. We're even going to talk about an integrated question set. It's going to take me a while to get that acronym.
It's not yet. It doesn't really roll off the tongue.
It doesn't. But I'll get there. But we're going to walk through one of those. We're going to talk about each part of the test, and we'll keep updating you as we think there's more to know about how to get ready. So hang in there, everyone. We'll get through this together.
Hang in there. Thanks for watching, and visit barexamtoolbox.com for more.